All right, so in our grand finale now, we have Steve Gompertz, who is going to give our last talk. Steve is a leader in quality systems management with over 30 years of experience in the medical technology industry. His career includes roles in quality systems development and implementation, project management, engineering automation, configuration management, audit, and software development for companies including Pelican Biothermal, St. Jude, now Abbott, Boston Scientific, Medtronic, Vital Images, and Control Data. He is now a consultant to the medtech industry, providing guidance on quality systems and regulatory compliance. Steve holds a BS degree in mechanical engineering from Lehigh University and certifications in quality management, medical device auditing, regulatory affairs, project management, and configuration management. Steve started his professional career in software development and then moved into system implementation, project management. After joining the medical device industry, he transitioned from implementing quality-related IT solutions to managing quality organizations and processes. Steve also helps St. Cloud State University develop and is a senior adjunct instructor in the program MS in Medical Technology Quality. In 2023, he was named Distinguished Speaker by the Society for Quality Assurance and was awarded the Charles W. Britswitz Distinguished Engineer Award by the Minnesota Federation of Engineering, Science, and Technology Societies. And two of your students are here today, too. So welcome, Steve. Thank you.
Great. Is there a remote? Oh, yeah, I see it. Great, yeah, thank you. All right, hi, I'm Steve Gompertz, better known as the guy standing between you and happy hour. It's open bar. It is, then I do have to get it done. Okay. I was going to hope he was going to say no, and then I said, then we got lots of time, right? Because this isn't going to be very interesting. So, yeah, he's already done a good introduction to me. And as he mentioned, I'm an instructor at one of the universities here, and two of my students are here. So make me look good, because they think I know it all, right? And really what I do is I listen to all these people and get it. I also kind of feel like I'm about to just summarize everybody else's slides from today. So maybe we can move through that quick. So the things I want to focus on today, from my background, you can see I'm more of a quality systems guy. I do a lot of auditing and helping people develop their quality systems. And I'm very much into the process approach, right, when those changes happen in the year 2000. And I'm often asking clients and people that I'm auditing, help me understand how your quality system follows a process approach. And I usually don't get great answers. But the follow-on to that has been when I asked them about that part of 1345 that says the quality system is supposed to be based on a risk-based approach. And I always get an answer. Oh, here, let us show you our risk management SOP. And I go, no, I asked you about a risk-based approach. And then they look confused and they go, here's our risk management SOP. I go, no, I'm going to look at design controls later. I want to understand for the entire quality system, tell me about your risk-based approach. And then I found that that's like 95% of the time, they just have no idea what I'm talking about. So that's kind of been my theme for the last year and continuing this year in speaking. So I wanted to help you differentiate if it's not clear, right, that those things are different, although a number of speakers touched on this today. Other things we've touched on today, right, is where risk management fits under that, and that risk analysis is something different as well, right? It is not equivalent to risk management. It is one of the things you do as part of risk management. So I will touch a little bit on that, but I think we've heard that a lot. And then this is the key, frequently when I ask those questions, so people go, well, how am I supposed to tell which one I'm supposed to do? And the answer is it's right there in front of you. 1345, based on its wording, does tell you which of these you're supposed to do. And then the last thing that comes up goes, well, what are we supposed to do to demonstrate that? And I'll give a couple of tips on how you might document that or establish that. I don't really need to do a slide. A lot of times when I give this presentation, people in the room have never even been through anything related to risk management. I could probably just do a quick pop quiz and go, all right, quick, give me the definition for risk, hazard, and put them all together, but I think we've heard that enough times today that we get this piece now. So I'm going to move on. All right, so what is this risk-based approach thing? All right, the risk-based approach is a mindset. It's the reminder that you need to be thinking about risk at all times, in all things that you do within your organization, within your operations, within your quality system. When you're going to make a decision in this industry, you do it based on the risks involved. Right? That includes thinking about, well, how are we going to identify those risks? Okay? And then how do we want them addressed? Okay? So it's starting to sound a lot like risk management, but it's not. Okay? We've talked earlier today about establishing, right? The organization needs to establish its risk tolerance, and there is no standard for that. Everybody has to do that themselves based on a variety of factors and variables that we've talked about today, right? And then the other key piece about risk-based approach is that it's not required to be a formal process. Right? It is the thought process, and that's why you often hear it just referred to as risk-based thinking. Right? So that opens up a lot of possibilities, which is then why I'm always confused why nobody does it when I ask about it in the audits, because it's actually not terribly difficult unless you fail to separate it from risk management. So let's start with this. How many of you did any of these risky activities today? Yeah, I would have expected to see all hands go up. Somebody wants to have done one of these, right? And they all do present risks in some way, okay? Did you apply any risk controls? Yes, whether you realize it or not, okay? All right, who drove today? Okay, did you have to back that car up? What was the first thing you did? You looked in the mirrors. You went around the guy behind you. Okay, yeah, right? How did you know to do that? Did you do a formal risk assessment at some point? You learned it over time, right? Somebody discussed it with you. You thought about the risks. Somebody helped you to think about those risks, right? So you did these kind of risk controls, most likely, or some form of them, right? Yeah, that last one, right, is an important one. Hopefully you think about that one. That's risk-based thinking, okay, or a risk-based approach. And again, I already asked this question, but has anybody got a good coffee FMEA? Email writing FMEA? Nobody did those, right? But you knew it, right? Because there are other ways for you to do that risk-based thinking and then decide what your risk-based approach is going to be for those kinds of activities. It's no different when we're talking about designing and developing medical devices or drugs or any other product for that matter, right? These concepts work across all of them. So again, the risk-based approach is that act of basing your decisions on the risks, right? On the mindset approach. Risk management, as Edwin just showed us and a number of other people showed us, right? There is a formal definition for this. It's the policies, it's the procedures so that you can continually analyze, evaluate, control, monitor, right? It is the formal methodology. But as I said, you don't need to do that in all places within your quality system. There are certain places. Now, we've seen a number of versions of this today, right? So I'm not going to take you through what the risk management process is supposed to look like, but that's the risk management, right? All of a sudden, there's this nice flow chart and arrows all over the place and a feedback loop. But you don't find a similar picture about risk-based approach because it is a little bit more open and available to you to decide, what do I need it to be? So RBA is intended to ensure that risk is considered throughout the QMS. Its focus is the quality system. Where risk management, as Edwin just talked about, and everybody else talked about, is the focus on the product life cycle, right? What are the risks of the device, right? So one is look at your processes. Oh, we're back to that process approach thing that I love so much, okay? And there should be risk-based approach built into that process approach. And possibly one of the decisions you're going to make is to do formal risk management of things that directly impact the safety and effectiveness of your device, where we're going to call it risk management. So where is this in 1345, sorry, in terms of risk-based thinking? Okay, well, it starts pretty early. Okay, we know we all skip sections 1 through 3. So you jump into section 4 because there's where the good stuff is, right? Except that 0.3 is where that process model stuff is. So I'd go back to that. But for risk, it really gets started in section 4, clause 4. And it says right there, you must apply a risk-based approach to your quality system. And then they go a little further, so within the same section, outsourced processes have to be controlled proportionate to the risk involved. And this is your hint, because now they're going to keep using that phrase, proportionate to the risk. That's why I have it in bold. When they talk about how much do you have to validate your software, well, it's proportionate to the risk involved. And that's just going to continue. We get into resource management. How much training effectiveness do you need to do? Well, it's proportionate to the risk. Okay, here's your sign, as that comedian likes to say. Right? This is the language you will see that is then consistent. Now we get into product realization, and we kind of, Ed's diagram touched on this as well, but that language does continue there as well. How much evaluation you do as supplier, proportionate to the associated risks. What's your response to any non-fulfillment when they deliver things and they don't go through an incoming inspection? Right? The actions you take are proportionate to the risk. How much inspection do you have to do? Proportionate to the risk, right? You can see, right? It's there. It's right in front of you. They keep telling you. Think about this and decide what will be your risk-based approach for that. Okay? Notice the words risk management don't show up. Right? They just keep telling you to consider things proportionate to the risks. That's the hint. Okay? And then, yeah, we've talked about measurement and analysis improvement, which gives you that connection back to the risk management process. But again, you're applying a risk-based approach to decide how am I going to do that and make that occur. Okay? So the opposite of that is, when is formal risk management required? Well, the key is you look for that term, right? And it shows up in all the places everybody else talked about today, mainly in clause 7, when we're doing design and development. You have to establish a risk management process. Well, that seems pretty clear right there. There's the first place where it says, thou shalt have a formal process now. Okay? All the other stuff was risk-based thinking. Now we're saying, no, game just changed. When we're designing and developing, we are going to have a formal process. And then it continues, right? As it was also talked about earlier, design and development inputs include the outputs of risk management. Notice it doesn't say the outputs of your risk-based approach. It says the outputs of risk management, right? It's very clear there. This came out just a little while ago in Edwin's presentation as well, right, around design and development changes. You need to evaluate the effect on risk management inputs and outputs as part of that. And then, yeah, we add on that piece around feedback, right, which becomes that this is likely to identify, I said may, but I think it's likely to identify risk management inputs. That'll take you back in that loop, that iterative loop that we've been talking about. Okay. So this always becomes the next question. All right, Steve, we get it. We have to demonstrate that we think about risk, if not actually do formal risk management. The one thing that's interesting is the standard doesn't ask you to document this. There's no such requirement out there. But we all know this industry, right? And we all know this phrase, if it isn't documented. Come on, students, shout it out. I make them do this all the time in class, right? All right. Right, we just know that's what this industry works on. We have to have records. We have to prove everything we did, right? So how do you do that? Since you probably should, but you're not required, is there a way to do it? Well, we talked earlier about, right, establishing your risk policy. One speaker talked about that, and others alluded to elements of that. I think that's a good place to establish it, right? Saying, these are the processes where we're going to apply a risk-based approach. We recognize this is where the standard tells us we have to do risk management, and just lay that out in our policy. Good place for policies like that would be your quality manual, right after you define your process approach. That's a whole nother course, right? But that's a good place to at least establish it, to show we've read the standard, we understand the standard, and our interpretation for our organization are these are the processes where we're going to do RBA, and we've recognized these are the places we have to do risk management. Now, sometimes what your decision under risk-based approach is, we're going to do formal risk management anyway, right? So that's always the option there. A lot of times what I do when I'm building brand new quality systems for clients is write in the template for SOPs. I put in a section in every SOP called risk considerations. Right? So I go well beyond the standard, right? Because we all understand the standard is the minimum, right? Not the maximum. So you're allowed to go beyond, and it's good practice to go, yeah, why don't we consider risk in every process in our quality system besides the ones that I showed 2 slides ago? So I usually say, yeah, let's just put a section in there. Doesn't have to be huge, a few bullet points. Hey, participant of this process, when you're doing this, keep in mind, these risks are present. Sort of like thinking about the inherent risks in your device. What are the inherent risks in our process? Okay? Now that could be challenging. Anybody figure out what are the risks associated with document control? That one always throws everybody. They're there, I can tell you what they are. We're not gonna do that today. But you can identify them. If you just put a little bit of thought, you can say, yeah, what do I want people to know about? Okay, yeah, there's a risk of not doing a good job of reviewing document changes and that those changes then propagate through the system. There's one for you. Okay, we want people to be aware of that. Don't just rubber stamp when you get, to approve that change request because, oh, 3 other people already signed off on it, I guess it's good. You have a responsibility to do your piece because of those risks. So it helps you create that awareness, which is a lot of what risk-based approach is about. And then you can establish, so what do we want, besides just saying, hey, be aware of these risks, it also gives you a chance to quickly say, either here's what we want you to do about that specifically, or just understand when you're reading through what the procedure tells you you have to do in terms of activities, now you understand why, right? And context is really important for getting people engaged in the quality system and getting them to think about risk, right? Not just, we're gonna tell you what to do, don't argue with us, don't deviate, just do it. Right? This helps you establish this is why you're being asked to do this. It's important, and we want you to understand that. Now, I had another client who already had a well-established quality system, and I pinged them in an internal audit, and then BSI did too, about not demonstrating risk-based approach, right? And I said, well, we can go back into every SOP and add that section. And they were like, no, we have 4 dozen SOPs, we're not updating every one of them. And they came back with an interesting solution that I hadn't even thought of, but I liked it. Everybody's got that matrix, right? That list, here's the clauses of 1345 and the sections of 820, and then here's our SOPs that match up with that. And they said, what if we added 2 more columns? One that said, here's the known risks for each of those SOPs, and here's what we want done about them. And now it's all in one document, one big spreadsheet. So, because they did demonstrate they could train everybody to that, and employees were aware of this spreadsheet, and I thought that actually is a pretty good way to do it. So there are ways to get it in there and not make this really burdensome as you're trying to establish this awareness of all of this. And then the other thing I always like to do, I do a workshop called Guerrilla Tactics for Quality Leadership, and one of the things I talk about is what's called hide the vegetables. Right, is just bury stuff in there without telling people what they're doing, right? And if you think about it, when I'm designing my forms, my templates, if I just embed the right questions, the right fields in there, they'll give you the information without you having to tell them, oh, by the way, you're doing risk, thinking at this point. They will just do it and you'll encourage it and it becomes, right, like, muscle memory, thinking memory now. They just automatically think that way. So there are some creative ways to get this in there, but again, none of this is set up in the standard as a requirement. All right, I did pretty good on getting us back on time, Ed. So key takeaways here. All right, again, keep in mind, there's a hierarchy to this. Risk analysis is an activity under risk management, or a series of activities, okay? Which in turn is a subset of risk-based approach. Right? And again, the risk-based thinking or risk-based approach is that mindset. Risk management is the formal process, and risk analysis is an activity or activities. I should probably make that plural. Okay? So they are all related. They are not synonyms. Please don't do that. You'll get Ed really annoyed. Post something like that, and you'll get a response from Ed. So, right? They are related. Yeah, so unless you want to hear from Ed, and he'll give you lots of really good feedback. If you want to say, try this one sometime, Ed, cover your ears. One day, just post somewhere around, Ed, risk management is risk analysis, or vice versa. You have no opinions on that, right? And nobody ever says that online, right? Yeah, so, Right, you have to keep in mind there are these connections, right? This connective tissue. Again, right? RBA, you're required to do RBA. You're not required to document it, but really, why would you not, right? Because you're going to get asked at some point. An inspector or an auditor is going to ask you, and what are you going to show them? You can just say, oh, we have lots of conversations about this. Yeah. Oops. Oh, BR for benefit risk assessment. Yeah, well, you have to come to my workshop tomorrow to talk about that one. So, anyway, as I said earlier, the possible outcome of your risk-based approach or risk-based thinking could be, oh, we are going to do risk management in this case, even though that's not a formal requirement, because we've decided that makes sense for this process. So it doesn't mean just because the standard doesn't say risk management doesn't mean you are out of having to do any risk management. You may still decide that is the best approach in that situation. Okay? But there are places, obviously, where you have to do it. And again, that risk-based approach can simply be, how do I make sure people are aware? That's really the intent of what they're trying to get from you. So, before we take questions, quick shameless plug. I mentioned I'm doing this, if this was not enough, I'm doing 4 hours of this tomorrow. In addition, some additional topics that should create some lively conversation. So I don't know if they're still taking, door entry or something, but I know there's at least 10 spots still available. So, all right, at the end, I'll put this back up, or we can take the questions now. But you can connect with me on LinkedIn here if you'd like.
All right, we have time for questions.
I made it.
Thank you for that lively presentation.
I got to get everybody awake again at the end of the day. At least it wasn't after lunch.
That was great.
But thank you for putting me after this guy. No big shoes to fill there.
Yeah, 2 great presentations at the end of the day. Wonderful. Questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a good eye-opener. How do you prove you do risk-based approach?
Well, I gave some examples there. I would have thought somebody would say, well, are there any, I mentioned that you can decide to do risk management. What are the good candidates for that? Yeah, oh, there we go. Now we have a question. So before I
question?
give my own.
Yeah, please bring the microphone. Yeah. Front corner.
It's
coming, it's coming. No. Over there, right behind you.
Have you seen the MDIC make Kappa cool?
Absolutely.
Okay, because that's a risk-based process. Anybody here see it? It's on, you just look up make Kappa cool.
That's the Medical Device Innovation Consortium.
Yeah.
Part of the FDA's, it's the end of the day.
Case for quality.
Case for quality, thank you, initiative.
But it's a combination of risk-based,
Yeah, and I was going to say,
plus considering if you have any issues with the product.
And Kappa would have been one of the ones where I said, well, where else might I do formal risk management? I think Kappa is a good opportunity for that. What the Make Kappa Cool initiative says basically is, and people like Kim Troutman, and they'll tell you this too, don't go for death by Kappa. Kappa is not your NC process. You should have a way to assess the risks and go, when does this escalate to Kappa? And of course, Kappa is a horrible acronym, and Kim will tell you it was the wrong acronym too. But that's a good place to go. Yeah, let's do some formal, again, you don't have to do FMEAs, again, because you don't always have to do FMEAs, right? Right, Ed? So, but it is a place to go, well, let's have some formal questions, right? And establish a process. I think supplier management's another easy one to go into and go, I see a lot of supplier management processes, and somewhere on the form, you classify them, A, B, C, D, right? But there's no criteria given. Well, there's usually a description. If they make this kind of thing for us, then they're Class D supplier or Class A or whatever. But there's more factors than just what do they make, right? There's how long have they been in business? Are they doing technology that isn't available anywhere else? There's a bunch of risk factors. That's a good place to go. Let's have a formal decision tree based on risk there. So there are opportunities, like I said, to do formal risk management in other places besides Section 7 or Clause 7.
More questions? One more in the middle. John?
The risk-based approach is focused on the humans in the organization, the quality systems aspect. But once you deviate from that, you also need a way to assess how reasonable it was to deviate from the risk-based approach because it's a soft control. Do you think there should be some focus on just culture in medical devices as there is in aerospace?
Yes. So I do a lot of consulting actually on quality culture. And so I hate like checklist approaches, what I described before. We're going to tell you what to do, just do it, don't deviate, without explaining the why and what's your role in all of this. And you don't get people to really engage and create a quality of culture if they don't understand the context of everything. So I'm a big fan of saying, yes, you should establish how are we going to, that could be another great policy in your quality manual. How are we going to, how does this company establish a culture of quality in there? The other place I thought you were going with your question was how do you then continue to prove that you're meeting that or know when your risk-based approach is not working, right? And there are those places in the standard, like an entire section that says you have to monitor processes and you have to do data analysis. There it is. That's where you'd build that in. Let's monitor those things we've said we're trying to control or at least keep people aware of.
Very good.
That's a good beginning, but the follow-on question, maybe broader, is we focus a lot on what we can control. The specifications, the systems, the information that's tied down in ink or in digital bits. But once we deal with people, so that means both the service people, but the manufacturing people or the people enacting the systems we lay down, you encounter culture issues like we did with the Boeing thing that Edwin mentioned. That's what I was focusing on. When do we turn our eye on that instead of trying to over-optimize the things we're already very good at?
So I'm a big fan of saying you don't measure people, you measure the process, which is what I was just talking about. So if you've got the right process monitoring in place, you should be able to detect, hopefully beforehand, if you're doing good trending and you've got good data analysis defined, which is also a requirement, right, in 1345, that you should be able to tell when things are going in the wrong direction, and if nothing else, when they've already gone in the wrong direction. So all of those things, again, this is part of that process thinking, is all of this is supposed to be connected, right, and provide all of these feedback loops. Risk management is not the only place where we have an iterative feedback loop. Same thing with design controls. Your entire quality system is a giant feedback loop. We're all familiar with PDCA. That's what 1345 is based on, right? That's that section 0.3 that nobody reads. That's what it's doing. It's telling you about PDCA. That's how you have to build your quality system, to have all of these checks and balances that feed one another and keep continually optimizing or improving your quality system.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Yep, you're welcome.
Wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I'll take that control.
I'll take my job.
So this is the end